Good morning! Greetings from eastern South Dakota. I'm Glen Rabenberg, and I'm going to speak about things that most guys won't talk to you about. And Kylen and Jeremy and the boys have given me a dirty, rotten, horrible task. And what I mean by that is, we were just talking this morning, if you have a good friend and you know your good friend is possibly doing something that isn't going to be of his best benefit down the road, are you the kind of friend to tell him? Knowing that you may risk your friendship, will you be honest and say, dude, that is not going to work, and I know why? I'm talking about agriculture. And I get the dirty job of telling farmers that the blueprint that we've gotten for quite a few years is not to our best benefit. We hear a lot of people talk about regenerative. We hear a lot about organic, chemical-free, sustainable, all these wonderful terms, but nobody really defines it. Nobody really puts the rubber on the road and gives you something that you can take with you. Several years ago, Acres USA, I'm going to just send those down. Acres USA had a healthy soil conference in Sacramento, California. And they called me and they said, we'd like you to speak on healthy soil and healthy plants. Everybody has a different version of what healthy is. A lot of people would say, well, dude up there is bald, he can't be healthy. That's fair. It's not much to look at. He can't be healthy. I'm not dragging a leg though. So when we look at healthy, and all these speakers that talk about healthy soil or healthy plants, but they never really tell you what that means. I'm going to give you my definition, and you can decide whether it's worth a crap or not. My definition of healthy is without disease or impairment. I'm from South Dakota. Simple, straightforward, common sense. So when we start looking at healthy soil, we hear a lot of talk about micronutrients, a lot of talk about potassium. And when Roundup was starting to tie up copper, iron, zinc, and manganese, you heard a lot about those micros. Now you're hearing a lot about boron, hearing a lot about moly, manganese, and all these different things. What makes up healthy soil? And in that soil, what makes up a healthy plant? So part of what we're going to do today is identify what healthy soil is comprised of. Does everybody have an orange sheet and a pen? We handed these sheets out because I can't do a PowerPoint and try to talk at the same time. I can't multitask. But I want everybody to have an orange sheet, and there's a very specific reason that the sheet is orange. It's harder to lose. The numbers that I'm going to give you, please, please, please talk to your seed guy. Talk to your agronomist. Talk to your chemical guy. Bring this up to your fertilizer man. And if you have anybody in the universities of academia, please talk about this. And I want you to have written proof about what we talk about so you can refer back to it, because these are not new numbers. And what I mean by that is the first written record of the information that we're going to talk about today I found in books from the 1850s. 1850s. This is stuff that nobody else talks about. So as we start looking at soil, If you look at the left-hand top pie chart, you'll see that there's some numbers there. And if you take a look on the right-hand side of that left graph, under composition of healthy soil, there's a number 45%. 45% of your soil, if you want to write this down, are minerals. So, most of us have soil tested at some point in time. If we get our soil test absolutely perfect, we're going to get a 45% on our test. Healthy soil. It's kind of where we're at. If we look at the experts, they'll say 5% of the soil, that top column, should be soil organic matter. We've covered 50% of the soil. Anybody have an idea what the other 25% are? I need a little help here. I'm from South Dakota. I'm a little slow, but I'm consistent. Anybody got any guesses? Any?
Oxygen. Air. Oxygen.
Okay, why am I giving a guy a buck at the front table? Make no mistake, fellas, knowledge is power. Power rules the world. And the more you know, the less someone can take you down a wrong trail. That's only $1 answer. There may be some better answers in the future. Oxygen is what this young fellow said, and thank you for that. Let's back up a little bit and make it more broad. Air. Air makes up 25% of your soil. And you have to have 25% air in your soil if you're going to have the other 25% be water. The air has to create a vacancy, a space in the soil for water to go in. If that air isn't there, you don't get water penetration. Not many people talk about soil breathing. Not many people talk about healthy microbes that we all have in our fields. Without adding any more, they're there. They're not doing anything, or they're not doing much, but they're there. Right underneath that pie chart, talks about a soil penetrometer. And this may be something new to some of you. This is a compaction meter. Take it out in your field and you slowly push down on it. You'll see how much pressure is in your soil. Many of you have used it. There's two different tips. A small tip is for dirt and clay. A big tip is what I'll be using next week in Florida for sand. When you push this down, you're looking for certain numbers. The perfect compaction that we have found, or lack of compaction that you're going to want to write on the sheet, is 100 to 150 psi is where we have found everything to work the best. What do I mean by that? If you have purchased some microbes from a company, or a microbial enhancer, or a prebiotic, or a probiotic, and you put it out and you didn't see anything, don't blame the company right away, other than them not telling you the whole truth. A microbe has to breathe. In the soil, you have to have aerobic, air-breathing microbes in the soil. If they can't breathe, they can't exhale carbon dioxide, CO2, just like we breathe. That CO2 is meant to go into the plant. And that plant takes that CO2 in to make sugar, photosynthesis. This is part of the carbon cycle that back in the 70s they talked about in 8th grade science. Simple stuff that still happens. If you have soil that you're pushing down and you hit 200 psi, don't put any microbes out there, because they can't stand it. I think these microbes are union. Because at 200 psi, that's way too much pressure. We're not working under these conditions, so they spore off or they go dormant. It doesn't matter how many more microbes you throw out there. If the first ones have suffocated, guess what the next ones are going to do? They're going to suffocate. So, when you hit 200 psi, there are virtually no microbes at 200 psi or higher based on these numbers. That's why when you look at anything under 200, it's the green zone. 200 to 300 is the yellow zone. The microbes aren't there, and most of the big synthetic companies don't want the microbes to be there, because the microbes, you're doing an awful lot of smiling back there. You know a lot of this stuff. Thank you for being here. I can see the brightness in your eyes. Thank you. The big synthetic companies don't want the microbes to be happy, healthy, and working for you. Why do I say that? Because the more microbes do as far as work in the soil, and they're in charge of everything, the more work those microbes do, the lower your input costs have to be. These microbes will take care of anything and everything given a breath of air and a little bit of food. Now, Kylen said there's no sales pitch here today. I'm going to call you a liar. I'm going to give you guys a sales pitch high pressure. Please think. Please think for yourselves. I'm selling you on the idea of challenging the status quo, of questioning authority. I have been what they call a disruptor in agriculture. And at first I thought, well, Mom always says, whatever you do, do it your best. So I've been kicked out and banned and blackballed from a lot of different conferences because the big chemical companies, the big fertilizer companies don't want to give money to have some freak from South Dakota tell growers how to do things naturally. That's not American agriculture. They want to get a hold of your checkbook as long as they can, for as many years as they can, keep you in the business, keep swatting you in the back end to keep you sustainably paying their bill. So at 200 psi and higher, your microbes shut down. They can't breathe, they can't move, they have their union card, they're saying this is too much pressure, we're not going to work. But a feeder root can still push through, not an anchor root for water or stability, but a feeder root. A fine thread feeder root can still push through up to 300 psi. And this is what the companies want, because if that feeder root is pushing through tight soil, it has no microbes on it to protect it. The microbes want to be there. They talk about a synergistic relationship. The microbes feed the root feeds the microbes and protects each other, so you don't need as many chemicals. Well, that's not the way to farm. We want crisis management. We want to put fungicide on the seed, we want to put fungicide in the plant, and we want to put some insecticide in there, and by golly, let's put some more on after that. Reacting to symptoms because nobody has told us how to correct the cause. I've asked a lot of people across a lot of different states and countries, what's the most important thing to you? And I've gotten a lot of answers. One guy says, I just got a ski boat, or a new set of golf clubs, or we just bought a cabin at the lake. Everybody's got a different answer. And one guy says, you know, we're empty nesters now. Kids are gone, and I actually really like my wife. I didn't think I did a few years ago, but I really like her. We get along and we're friends again. One guy says, you ask all the questions. He says, we've told you about ski boats and golf clubs and wives. What's the most important thing to you? Breathing. We don't think about it until you can't breathe. Air, romance, and heartbeat can all be lumped into one category. None of them are important unless you're not getting one of them. We breathe because we always have. Talk to somebody that has asthma and they can't find their inhaler. One of the biggest problems we're seeing is compaction, tight soil. So a lot of guys have bought a penetrometer and they will use it and then they will call in or email us and say, got a question. Should we be testing the soil when it's wet or when it's dry? And our answer is yes. It's like we're not trying to be a smart jack. Think about your soil. Think about your neighbor's soil. When it's wet after a rain or an irrigation, you can go down quite a ways. What happens when that soil gets dry? Turn to a brick. Okay, help me out here, fellas. I'm from South Dakota, a little bit slow. If you think about this for more than a second, you've overthought it. What's the difference between wet and dry soil? Water. More specifically, what is water? Hydrogen and oxygen. H2O. If your soil changes personality from wet to dry, it's like marrying a crazy girl. Those crazy girls that you dated in high school or college were a lot of fun for a little bit of time, but you don't want to marry them. I found out that the hard way. Soil should not get hard when it's dry. It should just get dry. Wet soil shouldn't be sticky and greasy and slimy when it's wet. My old professor would say every mineral has a job and a personality and a ratio with something else. Once you understand every mineral, its job and its personality, you now understand how soil works. So the first component of healthy soil is understanding the major components of that soil. pH. Anybody look at soil pH? Anybody think about what pH stands for? Potential hydrogen. And many times when I talk about hydrogen in an agricultural meeting, I will get wrinkled foreheads. I'll get furrowed brows. I'll even get some guy raise his hand in the back. He goes, I've been to a lot of farm meetings, but why in the wide, wide world of sports would you be talking about hydrogen? It's one of the lightest, squirreliest elements on the periodic table. Well, part of your soil test should include nitrogens. Nitrate, which is the vegetative root, stem, and leaf growth of the plant. And then you have ammoniacal or ammoniated. Nitrate is, do we have any chemists in the room? Crap. I was kind of hoping for somebody that knew more chemistry than I did. Nitrate, nitrogen. Nitrogen, 3 oxygen. Is there anywhere on this planet that we can get oxygen other than atmospheric air at an economical rate? No. So, when we talk about oxygen, the only place, and thank you for that great answer, oxygen can only be economically pulled from the atmosphere. 18, 19, 20% oxygen. The air has basically 78% of every breath we take is nitrogen. Why is that our biggest bill? Because somebody's told us it should be. So when we look at air, oxygen is, let's just say, 18%. We have to get this air into the soil. I'm not a very smart guy, but I learned just enough to make myself dangerous. We all listen to the weather from time to time, and we find out that they're wrong more than they're right, but their paycheck probably never gets docked. But there's high-pressure fronts and there's low-pressure fronts. My old minister was a meteorologist. When my dad was in the hospital, I learned a lot about weather many years ago. And he said a high-pressure front is heavy sinking air. Now all of a sudden it's just like, that's designed to push air into the soil. Air being 78% nitrogen, 18% oxygen, that's the breath of fresh air that the soil needs. If your soil is over 200 or 300 psi, that air will hit and bounce. You lose your nitrogen, you lose your oxygen, you suffocate the microbes, and you get the opportunity to write more checks to the fertilizer and chemical companies. Nothing against those guys, but I'm in you guys' corner. I'm a grower myself. I'm third generation on our family farm in South Dakota that's now a research farm. That's also now an organic research farm. So if you're over 200 psi, the air, the downward high pressure front that is designed to push air into the soil, bounces off. But don't worry about that, because you can buy more nitrogen. There's guys that'll sell it to you. Normally, a high pressure front precedes a rain event. After that rain event, you'll have a low pressure front, which is light, rising air. That's that nice earthy smell you get after the rain. That's the exhalation. Now, there's a lot of people in this industry that will tell you, and I'm glad there's a door right here in case things get ugly, but they'll say, don't till your soil. Good golly, don't till it. Don't you till it. You will lose all of the carbon in your soil if you till that soil. Here's something kind of funny. This is physics and chemistry. The carbon that they want you to leave in the residue on top of the soil after one growing season will oxidize 60 to 70% of all the stuff that you're going to need for next year's crop. When it oxidizes as it lays on top of the ground, it's lost, which means you get the opportunity to buy more stuff the following year. Yay. If you incorporate that carbon that's in the plant that will oxidize up, if you incorporate that into the soil, you're going to give something for the microbes to eat. Because if we breathe in air and give off carbon dioxide, we've got to have carbon and oxygen to make carbon dioxide. The microbes are no different. If you till that soil in and the microbes eat that carbon out of your stalk or the residue or the fodder or the stubble or whatever you want to call it, those microbes eat it and give off CO2. You're not going to lose that because CO2 is 1.5 times heavier than atmospheric air. The companies that are telling you don't till that soil And you may think this is crazy, and that's okay. I'm telling you what we have seen for almost 40 years across 38 states in the U.S., all the provinces in Canada, and 17 foreign countries that we work in. This will tell the crop. This will tell the disease level. This will tell your fertilizer needs. Air is more important than anything else. One guy says, "How can you say that?" And I said, well, green plants are supposed to give something off. And all of a sudden I see his eyes. He's like, He says, they take in CO2 and they give off oxygen. I said, yeah. And the more they can do this, the healthier they are, the higher their immune system, the less disease pressure you will have. So looking at your pH, pH stands for potential hydrogen. Potential hydrogen, and this is kind of weird because the higher your soil pH, the greater the potential, but the lower the actual. What do I mean by that? If you have a base saturation, is base saturation a new term or is that familiar for you guys? Dr. Albrecht back in the 50s and 60s talked about a base saturation where he said, let's just say this is a clay colloid. And he would say, there's 100 parking spots around this clay particle. And of these 100 parking spots, he wants 68, 69, or 70 parking spots to be filled with calcium. Wants 12, 13, 14 to be filled with magnesium. 2 to 5 parking spots, potassium. Here comes the big one. It says 8 to 10 to 12 parking spots with hydrogen. Please look at your soil test. If your pH is over 7, I'll bet you a new pair of boots and a cheeseburger that you have no hydrogen. Hydrogen. Why is hydrogen important? Well, pH. pH is very important because that stands for potential hydrogen. If you have no hydrogen in your soil, there's a lot of things that you're not going to be able to do. Plant's supposed to make sugar. That's called photosynthesis. Plant takes in sunlight, water, and minerals and magically makes sugar. Sugar, to a chemist, that's what it's made of. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. If your pH is over 7, you have no hydrogen in your soil, you have no hydrogen in your base saturation, that plant can't make sugar if it doesn't have hydrogen. If your wife or girlfriend or mom wants to make chocolate chip cookies and you don't have any chocolate chips, you're going to get a cookie, but it may not be what you wanted. If hydrogen isn't there, the plant can't make sugar. The sugar is designed as the immunity, the fuel, the protector, the growth promotant, the fuel of that plant that will carry you to victory lane. And here's what I mean about that. What a healthy plant is made of. If you see on your sheet, the largest increment is 47%. Now, most plants that we grow, the majority of their weight is water while it's in the field. Water's a variable, we all know that. 80 to 85% of a plant's weight while it's growing is water. Anybody have livestock here? Whenever you're doing a livestock ration, you do it on a dry matter basis. So let's take the water, get rid of it. Let's look at it on a dry matter basis. And just for easy figuring, let's say 80% of that plant was water. We get rid of that, we got 20% solids left. Of the 20% of the solids on a dry matter basis, the first number, the largest number, is 47%. Anybody have an idea what that 47% of that plant should be made of? Carbon! Yes! Oh. I hope we have enough fuel in the tank to get home. That's a $2 answer. Carbon. Why is that important? I'll tell you why it's important, because if the carbon in your soil is being depleted and going down and you have a deficiency in carbon, you're going to have a higher nitrogen bill. And I'll take that one step further. The plant wants to be made of carbon. If it can't find it, it's like, all right, it's a horrible substitute, but I'll take nitrogen. The lower the carbon and oxygen in your soil, the higher your nitrogen bill is. Okay, carbon is 47%. The next one is 43%, and that's oxygen. Where in the world can we find carbon and oxygen? Soil microbes. If they can breathe. So, microbes giving off CO2. That makes up 90% of the plant on a dry matter basis. But yet you have guys saying, well, check your boron levels. We'll check your copper, your iron, your zinc, your manganese, because glyphosate ties those up. Those are important, but here's how I got through college. If I looked at that sheet, it's like if I know two answers, I'm going to get a 90% on my grade harvest. 47 and 43, carbon and oxygen, you got a 90%. Okay, next increment going down. 4% of the plant. Guess what that is? Hydrogen. 4% of the plant, if you want to write that down, is made up of the dry matter weight of your plant. We're at 94%, and we haven't talked about anything most growers buy for their input costs. I must be nuts. The last 3% increments are where all the money's spent. 3% of the dry matter weight of a plant is nitrogen, and 3% is the soil minerals. Do you see why there's so many large agricultural companies that seem to do very well at our expense? So when you look at what a plant is made of, now this is a healthy plant. And my version of a healthy plant, without disease, without impairment. Doesn't need a fungicide, doesn't need a herbicide, doesn't need an insecticide, does not need a pesticide, does not have to worry about anything affecting it because it's strong, healthy, and will uphold itself. Meaning no disrespect, genetically modified plants, in my opinion, are not that. Every time they add a genetic modification to a plant, we have seen that it loses its ability to build sugar. It lowers the sugar content of the plant. A lot of growers have laughed at me for 20 years. This is a refractometer, and you can check your plant, or any plant, by just taking a drop of plant sap and putting it on the prism of glass close the lid, look at the light, and the light will refract through the prism of glass to show you the sugar content in BRIX, B-R-I-X. I've been laughed at this for years. They said, we've had one of those for 20 years. We've never found a way to get it to move. If this is what this measures, and if these are the elements that make this up, and if this makes up 47% of the plant dry matter basis, and oxygen makes up 43% of the plant dry matter basis, and hydrogen makes up 4%, we got a 94% chance of being right. And there isn't an agronomist, fertilizer, chemical, or seed dealer that wants us to know this. Because knowledge is power, and power does rule the world. Point being is, this has been around in the industry since the 1860s. Dr. BRIX, B-R-I-X, invented this for the wine industry. You can check the sugar content of the grape to see if it can make good wine. This is the fuel gauge. This is the energy level. This is the power supply. Say to an engine, this is the fuel, this is the air intake. It's pretty simple stuff. If you don't have fuel, motor doesn't run. If you don't have air, motor doesn't run. You got to have both. If you're not checking these, please do, for your own sake. This will tell you a lot more than what you want to realize. And what I mean by that is what we have seen is when genetic modification started, it started with Roundup Ready. And we found that we could take Roundup Ready corn and we could still run it up to 16 BRIX or 16% sugar. What we found is, and anybody that's been farming for a while, you had your refuge acres that you had to plant separately. And we found that was getting up to 18 or 19 or 20 BRIX. And it was out yielding the good stuff, the hybrid genetically modified Roundup Ready. And there's a lot of growers that say, well, why in the hell would we pay more money for a Roundup Ready when our conventional corn is doing better? And then all of a sudden it gets blended. These companies are smart. It's like, well, put it all in the same bag because it's easier for you. And it was. But now you can't check them. So Roundup Ready, we saw we could get, and we had many growers tell us we could get it to 16 BRIX. 16 BRIX is above the threshold of fungal diseases. Fungus and algae and mold are all part of the same scumbag family. Many years ago, soybean growers in Iowa were getting hit with Asian rust. And some of the academia university professors called me. They said, we'd like you to come down, like to meet with you, see what you know about Asian rust. So I get in the room and I introduce myself and it's, well, hello, doctor, good to meet you, doctor. There's 7 of them. And my last name is Rabenberg, and I've got some letters in my last name. These cats had more letters behind their name than I had in my name, so I was clearly the dumbest human in the room. And so they pull up and they said, tell us what you know about Asian rust. I said, that's great. I will. But I said, can I ask a question first? Because my old professor said the person that asks the questions controls the conversation. Remember when you got home late? Your parents came up and said, what time did we tell you to be home? Do you think you don't have to listen to us anymore? Have we not taught you anything? Guilting you. Rather just take a beating than the verbal abuse. So I said, rather than me starting off first, you guys are academia. You're the professors. You tell me what Asian rust would like. Lead professor says, warm, wet. And I'm waiting for more. I said, what's the rest? Well, that's all we know. And of course, my attorney says my lips many times have a higher gear than my brain. And I said, well, we could have gotten that answer from an 8th grade science student. They said, all right, Mr. South Dakota, what does Asian rust like? I said, well, Asian rust is a fungal disease. And all fungal diseases, mold diseases, algae diseases are all part of, in my mind, the same scumbag family. Yeah, they like warm, they like wet, but they like low sugar, which means low carbon, low oxygen, low hydrogen, which goes back to what the plant is made of. And you can check this. If you're under 10 BRIX of sugar, pucker up, because there's a chance that you're going to get some sort of a fungal disease. Fungal diseases also like a negatively charged environment for the most places. And most fungicides have a positive charge. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Many times it's a polarity or an electricity thing. If you're below 8 BRIX, hell's coming. And it's coming full color, and it's coming to get you. The reason I'm giving you these numbers is almost every time they add a gene or a splice, a genetic modification into these plants, growers are saying every time it happens, we lose a little bit of our sugar building ability. Many of the triple stacks, smart stacks, yada, yada, yadas are 3 BRIX, 4 BRIX, maybe 6, maybe 7. The whole goal with this genetic modification was to reduce chemical use, wasn't it? They gave us a blueprint for their success. This may sound crazy to you. I'm okay. I've made enemies and good friends all over the world telling the truth. If you want to get rid of some of your nitrogen bill, what's the plant made of? Start building the soil. Start nutriently building the soil. So, how am I doing for time, Kylen?
10 minutes.
Damn it. We're going to have to keep clicking here. So,
20?
the most important mineral content to a healthy plant, right below composition of healthy plant, if you have alfalfa, and if you want to grow good relative feed value that you can sell or feed, these numbers apply to you. Any perennial crop should be a minimum 2% calcium. Please write that in. Calcium, in my mind, is the mother of all nutrients. It's the fixer of all boo-boos. It's a finder of lost things. It's a nester. It's the creator of a good environment. And if mom isn't there, nothing happens good usually. Every mom has to have a dad, and in the soil, that dad is phosphorus. And for good alfalfa, if you got 2% calcium, you should have at least 0.3% phosphorus. When you get your alfalfa, wait, I should stop. Do we have any alfalfa growers here? Or meadow hay? Okay. When you get your alfalfa to 2% or more calcium, 0.3% phosphorus or more, your potassium will come down. And you want that to come down because every mineral has a job and a personality. Potassium is an electrolyte mineral. And if I were potassium, I'd come over here and say, ooh, that's water. I'll grab that, and I'll grab that, and I'll grab your water. I'm going to grab all the water. If you have an excess of potassium, it's going to grab an excess of water. That excess of water is going to dilute what? The sugar. When the sugar content goes down, now all of a sudden you've got problems. Welcome to North American agriculture. 2% calcium, 0.3% phosphorus will get you less than 2% potassium, and you're going to get a windrow that isn't going to shrink down to a scrubby little piece of crap that looks like nothing. 2% calcium, 0.3% phosphorus is going to give you a leaf that isn't long and narrow and serrated, that look like that. You're going to get an alfalfa leaf that is as big around and will cover a quarter, that is smooth. You're going to get stems that are small and solid. You're going to get feed that the cattle don't sort, that the cattle eat, digest, and benefit from with those numbers. Okay, jumping to carbon to nitrogen ratios. If you asked academia about carbon to nitrogen, they'd say, oh, carbon to nitrogen, you probably have 8 times more carbon than nitrogen in your soil. And they're right. The first line is most soils are an 8-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. And if you've never talked or heard about this, I'll explain what this means. If you go from the agronomy division, they'll say 8-to-1, you got all kinds of carbon. If you walk down the hall and talk to the microbiologists and ask them about carbon and nitrogen, they say, well, if you stop by the agronomists, they'll toot their horn and say 8-to-1. It says, but being a microbiologist, an 8-to-1 carbon and nitrogen just allows that microbe to breathe and to be alive and awake. Doesn't work, does not work, does not reproduce. It's just there, taking up space, virtually of no value. We know people like this. We're related to people like this, some of us. The next line, carbon and nitrogen, is a 16-to-1. That 16-to-1 is the first shot that the microbes are partying. They're reproducing. They're honeymooning. They are benefiting you. If your soil is at a 15-to-1, you're not high enough. We've had guys go from an 8-to-1 to 12-to-1 to a 13-to-1 to a 15-to-1. They're like, how long is this going to take? It's like, depends on your intent. And if you're only, the water level is the middle of your nose, you're not going to last long. Those microbes have to breathe and they have to eat. And they've got to have a 16-to-1 carbon and nitrogen in order to give off CO2. We probably all heard guys from the mycorrhizal fungi salesmen say, mycorrhizal fungi, they are wonderful. They're the spider web within the soil and they carry phosphorus. And all the stuff they told you about mycorrhizal fungi is true. And a lot of the agronomists say, don't till your soil because you'll just destroy all of these mycorrhizal fungi. Well, guess what, fellas? The same microbiologist that told me 16-to-1 is the minimum that microbes have to have. If you're under an 18-to-1, which is the third blank you're going to want to fill in, those mycorrhizal fungi are doing nothing for you unless you have an 18-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. Last but not least, good compost should be 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen. Now, if your soil gets tight, and we've seen this in a lot of different areas, especially in California and Oregon and Washington State, carbon and oxygen make up a majority of the plant. We want these microbes creating what makes up 90% of the plant. What's really sad, I kind of get this. Granted, I'm from South Dakota, but this is all part of what I believe was created in 6 days. There was a plan. We have opposable thumbs, so we have the ability to think. But yet we have companies that are telling us different for financial reasons other than ours. So when you look back up at a healthy plant, 47% carbon, 43% oxygen, that makes up 90. If you look at the carbon to nitrogen ratio, that's a 30-to-1. Look at carbon and oxygen to nitrogen on the healthy plant. Now, and what I mean by that is carbon and oxygen have to be looked at together. And what happens is a lot of times if you're at 100 to 150 psi, there's partying going on and the microbes are there if there's carbon to eat. If your soil seals off when it gets dry and you get that crust and it gets hard, everything's fighting for the oxygen. Because every mineral that you've seen on your soil test, almost everyone has to be hooked to oxygen to get to the plant. Phosphorus is one of the most obvious. You look at your soil test and they'll say P, P1, P2. But if you don't have oxygen, the plant will not get the phosphorus. And maybe one or two of you have had a fertilizer guy that says, well, you got plenty of phosphorus in the soil, but it's all tied up. Or it's possibly unavailable. Check to see what's going on in your soil. So, what we have found, next bracket down, top 5 things for soil and plant health. Number 1, you have to have available calcium in the soil. Calcium is mom. She's the nester. She's the creator. She's the fixer of all things. Number 2, you got to have phosphorus. Calcium and phosphorus are the 2 most important minerals for the plant to start making sugar. If the calcium and phosphorus aren't available and aren't in the plant won't make sugar. So knowing the plant needs to make sugar, we got calcium and phosphorus to start the process. Number 3 and number 4 on that is carbon and oxygen. And then number 5, when your calcium and phosphorus and carbon and oxygen are all in check, if you want to throw some microbes out there, you'll see a benefit. But please don't do it before that. It won't make you money. Do I have 3 minutes? I apologize, I get a little wound up because I really enjoy doing this. Questions, comments, concerns, anything's legal. Yes, sir.
How are you measuring calcium in the soil? Are you just looking at a ratio, or is there some other metric that you're using?
Thank you. The question was, how are you looking at the calcium? I'm looking at the calcium, and what we've seen is looking at the calcium to magnesium in the ratio. And a lot of people will say, well, I've got 74% calcium in my soil. Calcium is one of the heavier minerals in the soil, and it only has one movement. It only goes down. And that's why I'm not for a no-till, because if the microbes aren't there because you got tight soil, if the carbon isn't there, you're starving them out. The microbes aren't there to grab that calcium and turn it into a microbiological casserole. And then when that microbe dies, it decomposes and becomes a humus that doesn't leach. So look at the calcium to magnesium ratio on your base saturation. And it doesn't matter what the calcium number is, but relate it to what the magnesium is. If your magnesium is 15 or 16%, which we see a lot in the Midwest, doesn't matter what your calcium is, you need a little bit more. Magnesium, I wish I had more time. Magnesium is an electrolyte mineral, the second electrolyte mineral that will electrically tie up nitrogen on a 1-to-1 basis. If you want some free nitrogen that really isn't free, you probably bought it before. But the higher the magnesium levels are in your soil, the higher the nitrogen that's tied up. If you put a good available calcium, keep in mind calcium's mom, calcium will see magnesium causing a problem and she'll grab it and say, magnesium, let go of that nitrogen. And you'll see it go to the plant. So you'll get, and that will change your carbon to nitrogen ratio. Not by adding carbon, but by getting rid of nitrogen. Make sense? Yes, yes. And if your pH is over 7, you probably don't have any hydrogen. And hydrogen makes up 4% of the plant. Nobody wants to talk about it because that will solve problems. Getting your carbon and oxygen up will cut your nitrogen bill down. Getting the hydrogen up will give you more sugar. That'll cut your chemical bill. God, this all sounds so simple. Any other? Yes, sir.
So like in our environment, it can be pretty dry. What about like a strip till versus full-on tillage? I mean, have you seen that be as beneficial or?
Don't take my word for it, but I've got a lot of strip tillers for neighbors. And they say, yeah, we're putting that 6, 8, 10-inch slot down the field and we're going to plant right on it. And I said, we know where the corn's going to be on that slot. But I said, I bet by the middle of June, we can't find that slot. And so we'll put the small tip on. And I said, we know where the strip till was, but just humor me and see if you can feel it. And I've been in hundreds of fields and they're like, I hate this machine. This sucks. Magnesium is an electrolyte mineral that electrically likes to tie stuff up. So a strip till is good, but depending on your soil, and the other thing is, if you haven't bought one of those, don't. If a neighbor wasn't here, tell him to buy one for you and you'll show him how to use it. Because not everybody has to have one of these. But you're going to find out real quick that you won't need this because as you walk on that soil, you'll feel it. But in most cases, and don't take my word for it, please test. Please do your own research. Please do your own homework. Your future depends on it. So what you're going to find is that soil, depending on the magnesium level, doesn't stay as mellow and as soft as long as what you'd hoped it would.
What brand is that? What brand?
Agritronics.
Yeah, that's what you recommend.
There's nothing fancy about this. This is one of the least expensive ones. I got this because the tips fit in the handle, and I had a whiskey drinking neighbor cut this and thread it when he had a few whiskeys, so it isn't quite straight, but so I can travel with this. But we've had good luck with this. This one has gone all over the world a couple times, and it still works. So the cheapest place you can get them, but Agritronics is the one that we've used. Without further ado, I'll be around afterwards if anybody has any other questions, comments, or concerns. I hope this information has been a benefit, and I appreciate you and thank you for your time.
My name is Brad Zimmerman. I'm from Central Illinois, about halfway between Chicago and St. Louis. My office is in Tremont, Illinois. Has anybody heard of Tremont, Illinois? You know what we're famous for? Anybody know Greg Souter, Precision Planting, 360 Yield Center? That's his birthplace. So there should be a sign as you go into Tremont that says birthplace of Greg Souter. There's not yet. We'll see what we can do. Thanks for allowing me to be here. I'm not a professional speaker. I'm a farmer who is just really curious, and I found that by talking to other guys like you, I could tell there's a lot of progressive farmers in here that we can work together and we can go a lot faster than we can on our own. So appreciate you guys being here. I look for this to be an open discussion. I want you guys to challenge me. I want to challenge you. Mainly what I'm here to do is to help you guys think differently. As an agronomist, It's my job to be another set of eyes and a different way to look at things. And Glen's done a great job with that. I appreciate what he shared before, and it leads right into what I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to take a half hour or so and just kind of share with you what I see and what I've been doing. Like Kylen said, I've started formulating my own stuff because I've learned that there's a ton of margin in the products that you guys buy from the big ag companies. And that kind of pissed me off because it's hard to make that stuff ROI. A lot of this stuff works. Most everything works, but does it work well enough to make money on it for Kyle to use it, or for anybody else to use it, for me to use it? And I started getting frustrated because I can move the needle, but not enough to make it worthwhile. So we'll start with this. This is just a little bit of what I've done in the past. Planted into green cereal rye. I love cover crops. I love carbon, just to build on what Glen's been saying, but there's no better way to build carbon than through cover crops and growing roots. So like I said, my challenge to you is to think differently. Steve Jobs did a great job of doing this. He revolutionized the cell phone industry and electronics because of how he thought and how he approached things. So I want you guys to do that as farmers and growers. One quote that I love, it says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And Glen kind of hit on it too. Us as farmers, me included, we go out there and we decide what we're going to kill, every day, whether it's a weed or a fungus or, whatever. And it's so much easier and it's so much more fulfilling when you can move to growing things and move to working with Mother Nature as opposed to trying to work against her. One thing that I keep true to myself is to believe in yourself even when no one else will. So Sasquatch is a prime example of that. So here's just a couple of things. My goal here today is to make you guys more profitable, to make you more money, right? By mostly through feeding the plant and taking what's in the soil. You've built your soil up, like Glen says. Let's take what's in the soil and let's make it more available to the plant. David Hula, he grew, what's the world record in corn? How many bushels did he grow? You guys remember?
600, 6 quarters.
Yeah, over 620 bushels an acre, right? He planted the same genetics that you're planting. He used a John Deere planter with some precision planting parts on it. He pulled it with a John Deere tractor. He's in some of the oldest soils that have been worked in the United States. What is the one thing that he's done differently than what we're doing? He's paying attention to nutrition, right? He's feeding the plants what they need, when they need it, maybe over the top, maybe a ton more passes than what we would normally do. But my point is, it's not the equipment, it's not the seed, it's what you do nutritionally and how you get that nutrition into the plants. So in Central Illinois, I actually live in a town called Groveland. I took 40 acres and divided it up into quarter acre plots so we can do replicated testing. I did that. 2019 was the first year I did that. The reason I started doing that was I had a guy come to me, and a lot of the principles that he's taught me I'm using now. But he was saying he was getting 45 bushel improvement with his program. And I said, that's bull. You're not. And he's like, yeah, I am. And I went and looked at what he was doing, and I'm like, I don't know if that's really true, And so I'm like, I'm gonna try it myself. If this is really true, if you're doing this, then I want to do it too. So I put in some replicated testing, started testing some other products too, some things that you probably heard of, the Pivot Bios, the Sources, the Whole Organics, all those things, Green Lightning. But I really wanted to know what he was doing, and so it was based on calcium. It was based on ocean minerals. It was based on enzymes. It was based on humics and fulvics. And a lot of the things that you don't hear about, that Corteva doesn't talk about, and Syngenta doesn't talk about, and Nutrien doesn't talk about, well, they're starting to now because they're realizing that this stuff is working. So fast forward my first year with his program, I saw a 9 bushel improvement. I'm like, that didn't pay for the program. He said, be patient, keep working with me. Second year we did it, we saw 13 bushel improvement. All right, fair enough. That's better. We're moving in the right direction. The third year, we saw 21 bushel improvement. And so I'm continuing to work with this. And my biggest takeaway is that as you continue to do the right things and continue to change your soils and you continue to make them better and you give them the things that they're lacking, not just NP and K and maybe some sulfur and a little bit of boron, if you give them everything that they need, then that's the secret to it. So we'll see how it keeps going. Again, sometimes as things go down the pipeline, they get pretty expensive. So it's I took it upon myself to kind of recreate that and make it my own and add some things to it because I think there's some things that were lacking in that program. So that's kind of the program that I'm working with right now, but I wanted to do it, on my own. Like I said, the more I share, the more I learn. So, love meeting you guys. My phone number was up at the top. It'll be there at the end. I want you all to take it down. Feel free to call me, text me, because I feel like I learn much more from you guys than what I can contribute to you. So, as your circle grows, as you meet people, your influence will change, but also your knowledge patterns will change too. So I took a couple things that I learned and I realized that we had to unlearn them and then we had to relearn them. So one of the things that I learned from my dad's on the right. He passed away in 2013, which allowed me to come back to the farm. And so I took over the farm after he passed. This guy, David Brandt, you probably know who he is. But what made my dad a good farmer back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s was he was an awesome mechanic. He could make anything work. He could fix anything. He was great at welding, fixing tractors, whatever. That's what made him a great farmer, right? Now, he was a bit on the progressive side. So he was one of the first ones to no-till. They were using anhydrous at the time, and he started strip tilling on top of the anhydrous with GPS. Then he went straight into strip till before he passed. And that's what made him a good farmer. Today, that's not what is going to make a successful farmer, right? The successful farmer, you had to relearn that a successful farmer is more like a CEO running a business. So you're coming to meetings, you're running the numbers, you're looking at data, you're using things to help you run a multi-million-dollar business, right? So like any good company running a multi-million-dollar business, we need to dedicate 5 to 10% of our farm to R&D. Is that something that you guys will typically do? Is there anybody doing that? 5% R&D. You're taking 5% of your acres and working with them. Is that pretty valuable?
You learn a lot.
You learn a lot. You learn what works. You learn what don't work. You have problems. You have plugged screens.
I do pretty wild things, so yeah, I can't even touch it right now.
Yeah. We'll save that for later when it's not on camera. Back in the day, I learned that university and ag retailers were going to tell me everything I needed to know, right? Big ag was going to take care of me. If it doesn't come from them, it's probably horse piss or snake oil or something, and it doesn't work, right? They're going to tell me everything I need to know. Now, I didn't put University of Nebraska up there. I probably should have, but as I stayed over at Kylen and Rebecca's last night. I drove in yesterday, and I was talking to Kylen, and we were talking about University of Nebraska and Cornhuskers and Rabid fans and all that stuff. And Kylen told me that the reason that there's a big N on the stadium up there, it stands for knowledge. So thanks, Kylen, for enlightening me. Now, I shouldn't talk because I'm from Illinois, and we've probably got more governors behind bars than Tom Osborne has wins. So I've got no room to talk. But, I mean, we used to look to the universities, and they do great work. You know, they put out white papers, peer-reviewed papers, and I'm going to source a couple of them here going forward. But we've got to do our own research, right? We've got to talk. We've got to get out of the mainstream. Otherwise, we keep going down the same road that we've been in from before. So we need to relearn how to balance our nutrition, and that's what's going to lead to healthier plants. Precision Planting's doing something pretty cool. They've got their radical labs, so they're trying to analyze and show us how we can better determine what our sufficiency rate should be in soil. So this is one thing that kind of got me. If you look at this is a fertilizer rate table and recommendations. So over here on the right, Illinois' got their recommendations, Iowa, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio. And what kind of baffles me is that there's such a big spread between what's sufficient in Indiana and what's sufficient in Illinois, that if you go a couple miles over the border, that it all changes, right? And so who's right? Which one is right? Are either of them right? Are any of them right? David Kleinschmidt says that, and I think Ray the Soil Guy says this too. He's like, all soil tests are wrong, but some of them are useful. And that means basically use them as a gauge, don't take them as gospel, right? Because they can change so quickly, and we don't know exactly what to believe. We also learned the chemical and physical. So chemical being your herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. Physical being how you work the soils. That's what we focused on. That's what Dad focused on. Well, we also learned that biology trumps everything as you get into it. So that's one thing that I really like to focus on is the biological portion of it. Because you've all seen the tree growing out of the sidewalk, right? There's no nutrients there. The only thing that make those nutrients more available is the biology. Started learning a lot about frequency. If we had time, we'd go into that. I think Kylen's been dabbling in it a little bit, but the frequency packs, like with irrigation water and restructuring water, I think there's a ton of value in that. I won't tell a story, get too long. Here's a study by, I can't say his last name, he's Indian, but I was looking for something to illustrate how your nutrients get tied up and how fast they get tied up. So your MAP and your DAP broadcasts will start to tie up almost immediately once moisture is introduced. Within 6 weeks, most of the phosphorus will be tied up with calcium, iron, and aluminum, and 10 to 30% of that broadcast pass will be available year one. So that phosphorus that you put out there, very little of it is available for the crop. So you're feeding the soil, and that's not a bad thing, but is that really what the end game is? We want to make sure that it gets into the plants. 1 to 3% of that broadcast application will be available year two, so virtually none of it. The reason for this, and Glen kind of talked about this, P2O5 or PO4 has a -3 charge. And the more charges you have, the more strongly it attracts to each other. So phosphorus binds heavily to aluminum, iron, and lead that are in your soils. So as soon as phosphorus gets exposed to those, it gets broken down, then it wants to tie up as fast as it can. And those are really hard bonds to break. One of the only things that can break it is the biology, your microbes. Nutrient pool. So I put this in here because I wanted to accentuate the fact that there's a lot of nutrients in your soil, right? An acre slice, 6 inches down an acre is 2 million pounds, right? That's a lot of pounds. It's a lot of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. So if you use potassium as an example, this guy had 3,690 pounds of potassium in an acre. The extractable pool, so what you could pull out with the Malick test or the ammonium acetate, was 530 pounds. But that's different from what the plant actually can uptake, or what is available to the plant. So 1.9% of that total pool is available to the plant, and that changes within the hour, within the minute, based on water, based on soil type, based on all kinds of things. So if you understand that there's a ton of nutrients available, there's a ton of nutrients, we just got to make them available, then we can move forward and utilize those. So I did a total digestion test. Has anybody done a total digestion test? Yeah. So this one is on my field. Phosphorus, potassium. Phosphorus, we found in the top 6 inches, there's 1,422 pounds roughly of total phosphorus in the soil. Conversely, we found that there's 23,994 pounds of potassium in the soil. So these are a little heavier clay soils, a lot of potassium in there. If you take your parts per million or your ammonium acetate test and you see that there's 300 parts per million, right? So that's 600 pounds. That's an incredibly small amount of number that's available to the plant versus what's in there, right? I thought this was pretty cool. Dr. Kahn, who's done work with the potassium paradox at U of I, he's also done an experiment with nitrogen to find out how much applied nitrogen that you apply within the year actually gets into the plant. It says, if you want to fix your soil, don't chase potassium, fix your calcium, fix your carbon, and your roots will find what they need. And Glen and I didn't even get together on this. That's exactly your message, isn't it? You like that? I'll send it to you. So this is that, you can't read this probably, but I'll read it to you. So this is a study that they did. Basically what they did is they wanted to find out how much nitrogen that we apply as farmers actually makes it into the corn plant. And what they found, so they used the N15 and a radioactive isotope so that they could measure it, right? So they applied it. I think there was some with the planter and then some with the Y drop. So very, very efficient. Using the N15 method, the researchers reported that 12 to 34% of the N in corn grain and 16 to 42% of the total nitrogen in the plant came from the fertilizer. That means that 79% of the grain and 72% of the total N came from the soil. While this was interpreted as an indication that fall-applied ammonia was not efficiently used by the crop, there was no spring-applied ammonia for the study comparison. So this one, they used fall-applied anhydrous ammonia. Now, I was out on the mower, so we were mowing our ditches, and I was thinking, that's a great place to do it, right? And I was thinking, how much of the applied nitrogen that we actually apply goes towards each plant in relation to this? So I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need a calculator. But What do you guys typically plant as a population here in Nebraska? Irrigated corn, average. 32,000. Does anybody use 32 or 28%? Anhydrous? Nobody uses 32 or 28%? Yeah, okay. So if you band it, say we do some with 2x2 on the planter and some Y drop. How many pounds would you typically fertilize for what, 240 bushel? Is that fair? How many pounds of nitrogen did you guys put out?
With the planter?
Total.
Don't ask me.
180, 200, somewhere in there.
200? So somebody take 200, we'll just multiply that by 0.32. That should be about 70-ish. 64. So if you take 32,000, so 64 gallons of 32% is needed, and you're going to apply that over 1 acre. Does that sound about right? Throughout the year? Multiply that times 128 to get the ounces. What's that number?
8,192.
Ounces. Divide 8,192 by the number of plants in an acre, 32,000 population. And that will give you the number of ounces that each individual corn plant gets access to.
0.256.
So, a quarter of a shot glass is all that, in a typical year, the applied nitrogen that a single corn plant gets. That's not very much. That blew my mind. That's a pretty big, that's a 12-foot tall corn plant going off of a quarter ounce of applied nitrogen. Much to the point that most of it actually comes out of the soils. Healthy, cycling soils. Now, of course, if you don't have healthy soils, you don't have as much given to you. Another reason why we want to pay attention to what we're doing. I thought this was pretty cool. Anybody know what's circled on here? What these little balls are?
Soil aggregates.
Say it again.
Soil aggregates.
Soil aggregates come from what?
Soil biology.
I think those come from earthworms. Those are earthworm middens. So I was driving out here, Central Illinois. We're not as fortunate as you guys out here. You guys have a ton of livestock. I'm super jealous. I love it. We don't have that. So my livestock is earthworms, and that's my manure right there. So healthy soils, that's what you're going to have. So sometimes I'm looking at things, doing things from a different perspective. One thing that got me going was all the math involved, right, with soil. So one of my friends, he says soil doesn't math, right? You can't, it's not a chemistry set. It's not a chemistry equation. There's so many variables. There's so many living things involved in this that it's frustrating, right? You guys as farmers give me an equation. Let me know how many ounces of this I can apply, and it'll get the job done. Well, that doesn't work rarely. So trying to figure it out. I've sought out.
Can I see you look at things like that, please?
You went to bed last night. That happened. You went to bed early. So I greatly appreciate some of the people that have mentored me and have poured into me. This is a guy, his name is Brad Forkner. He's an interesting cat, but he's full of great ideas. And so he's been gracious enough to help me get started formulating and putting things together and thinking about things differently. We were talking about David Hewla, and this is where most of us are. This is in hectares, kilograms per hectares, so it doesn't mean anything to us, but I just like the visualization of it. Here's our corn yields where we're at. There's the potential. According to the record yield, 626 bushel. Abiotic stress is orange. Biotic losses are blue. So that's weeds, insects, things like that. What I want to focus on is the stress, the abiotic losses. So salty soils, heat, not having enough nutrition, things from the environment that causes that plant to stress. So that's one of the things that I'm focusing on in the future, is trying to limit that stress, making sure it's got all its nutrients it needs to be efficiently functioning, and trying to limit that stress. I think there's a lot of ground to be gained in terms of yield by doing that. Brad did some work with Jason Webster up at the PTI farm. So Precision Planting has 400 acres that they do unbiased research on. Jason Webster, if you guys are familiar with him, he does a great job, super energetic guy. So Brad got invited to do one of the high yield plots up there. So a lot of what we do is in here, and there's some extra things that he did as well. He was going for high yields. But just trying to show that we can move the needle and that we can do it profitably. So that year, this is hard to see. This is irrigated, but 316 bushel corn with some DeKalb, 44 bushel over the control. So that's pretty impressive. $205 in additional ROI. So that was done by reallocating some of the dry spread he does in the fall in order to pay for some of this program. Reallocating from the fall, dry spread, anhydrous, all those things, looking at things differently and putting them in there. So you saw some of the weird stuff that was in there. Fish, kelp, ocean minerals, fulvic acid, INFX, which is bacteria, fungi, essential oils, molybdenum, yucca, zinc, weird stuff, but it's all in there for a reason. Was it Eric that talked about the oxygen? Was that your name? Yeah. Really like the fact that you were talking about that. That's really what we focus on, is the multiple modes of nutritional movement. So taking what's in the soil, getting your soil balanced, getting those nutrients in. So whether it's fulvic acid, whether it's essential oils, whether it's amino nitrogen, whether it's oxygen or hydrogen donors, getting that stuff into your plant so it's more efficient and more effective. Worked with a guy, his name is Wendell Good. He grows wheat. I don't know why he grows wheat. Wheat's not worth anything, but he enjoys it. He won the yield contest last year, 147 bushel an acre, using a lot of the things, multiple modes of nutritional movement, right? Trying to supply the plant with everything it's got, everything it needs, not just NP and K. That's Faulkner's quote right there. It doesn't matter how much nutrition is in your soils. It only matters how much your plant can take in at the right moment. The product he's developed is called Whole Shot. This is a lot of things in it. I only put this up here just to show you the diversity of what we've put together, and the fact that it's all got a place in there. So your kelp is provides cytokinins, right? Kelp in the ocean grows a foot a day, so it's a great growth regulator. Yucca is a desert plant, so it's got saponins in it, which is fungicide. It's got fungicidal properties. It also helps in stress relief. Fulvic, they use fulvic in chemotherapy to get the chemo drugs into the cells. We're using that same principle through nutrition as well. Amino nitrogen does the same thing. Amino-chelated nutrients go into your plant better. 90 different ocean minerals. This was really hard for me to get my head around. Salts, we've always been told that, salts are bad, and a lot of salts are bad. UAN has a lot of salt in it. Potassium chloride has a lot of salts in it. There's different kinds of salts though, right? If you take a product like this, we use a product called C90, and you guys may have heard of it. I think Redmond's got a salt too, Celtic salt, the different salts. If you take that versus your iodized salt from the store, that iodized salt is dead. It's been processed. It's hardly even salty. Once you try like the mineral salts, it's a totally, completely different mouthfeel. It's completely different flavor, completely different taste. And the reason for that is it's not just sodium and chloride, it's the 90 different other minerals that come with it, right? So something that blew my mind is that if you look at it, your blood, the human blood, and we've talked about the relationship between human health and soil health and plant health, your human blood is roughly the same nutrient makeup. It's got those 90 different ocean minerals, 90 different minerals in it, same ratios as the soil, which is basically the same ratio as oceans, which kind of makes sense if you think about the Great Flood, if you believe in that, how they would all be the same, right? Man's made from the soil, flood replenished that. So things like selenium and a lot of these minuscule nutrients, I call them, they're being used. They're being used within, maybe not in the corn plant, but the processes. Maybe it's a coenzyme, maybe it's a cofactor, maybe it helps something else to go right. We're using those, but are we replenishing those? I wasn't. So the ocean minerals help to do that. They help your processes to work better, in my opinion. This is something we threw together. It's moly, it's nickel, it's cobalt, right? All three things that help the nitrogen process go better, make it more effective and efficient. So that's kind of where our mind is headed. Cedar heater, essential oils, those also help nutrients get into the plant. 5-way sweetener, we've used everything from dextrose and sucrose, and we add in some molasses, we add in some naturally dehydrated cane sugar, we added in some aloe. So going from short chain carbohydrates to very long chain carbohydrates to feed the different types of biology, different types of plant life, and not make just one go explode and go anaerobic. You want to supply them all, because to use your analogy, if they're unionized, if you're only feeding if you're only feeding the welders, then the welders get everything done and nobody else does, right? You need to feed them all. Carbon is the currency of the soil. Sugars are the $100 bill, right? So the whole goal of the plant is to make sugars and to send them down. At night, they send down sugars to feed the microbes. During the day, they pull up those nutrients that the microbes bring to the plant and utilize it and photosynthesize to make more sugars, send down at night. This was interesting. Last year, I had a guy put on some product, and this was soybeans after corn. It was soybeans 2 years before. No inoculation, so we didn't put any Brady Rhizo on there. But he started growing nodules at V1. And my thought is that it's the moly that did it. Moly helped out with that. But nodules at V1, and they continue to look great all through the year. This was some crap ground. It was white timber clay, and we have white timber clay in Illinois. It's not just flat black and beautiful. But he was really impressed with that, and I think those were 85 bushel beans. Talking about water, I thought this was really interesting. I found this earlier this year. This is a study by Purdue University, talking about product half-life in regards to pH. So pH of 9, pH of 7 neutral, pH of 5 acidic. Your herbicide will last about 10 minutes before half of it is gone. Half of the active is gone in a pH of 9. Fungicide, 2 minutes. Insecticide, 24 hours. So a lot of our well water is 7.5, 7.8, 8, 8.3. So if I'm mixing up my fungicide pass, and I've got a couple drones, so we were doing this, and we weren't checking the pH in the water. You know, if we make it up in the morning before we head out and we spray it in the afternoon, there's a good chance that a lot of that has already been degraded. So much to your point, that's something we're really going to look at pretty hard in the future is your pH and the water condition. That's all I have. Do you guys have any questions?
How effective is the whole shot going to be if you still have the compaction issue?
Not much. Yeah, so a lot of the stuff we're doing is you're building on the basics, right? You got to get your planter set right. You got to get your soils fertilized basically right. If you've got tough ground, I mean, that's going to help those nutrients work better, so you're going to get some efficiency there. But, I mean, much like anything, you got to get the foundation right before you build the building, you know.
Questions for Brad? Glen, did you say anything there? Just wanted to feedback, put that? Anything?
I've been to so many seminars and conferences where it's nothing more than reaction to symptoms with this chemical and that chemical. You know, we've talked for a while, but this is, from my camp, it's like yippee skippy. Finally, the chemicals are losing their edge. It's taking more and more. They're less effective. And it's nice to hear that people are focusing on correcting the cause rather than reacting to symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Glenn.
I would agree. Can I use your little clicker, your plugger?
Yeah, it's not working for me, so maybe you can get it to work.
It's not working for you?
It didn't, no. While you set up, this is something we've been looking at too, just something interesting. Side note, this is pecan fiber. So when pecans are harvested, the shells are the waste product. What we're doing, and Brad is heading this up, we've actually got some, the USDA lab in Peoria is actually looking at it, and they're actually pretty excited about it. Pecan shells are super high in antioxidants. So blueberries are typically like a 600 or 700 on the antioxidant scale. This is like 16,000. So the reason why it's attractive is it's a waste product, so it doesn't cost much. But B, we're looking at putting it in seed treatments. We're also looking at putting it in cattle rations. And Brad's talked about, you know, it's cleared up listeria and coliform and so many other diseases because of the antioxidant properties. So we'll see where it goes, but that's one of the things that Forkner does. He thinks outside of the box, and that's why I appreciate that about him. So, All good? Thanks, guys.
So, like we mentioned before, we want to talk about building the foundation, get things started right, get your soil to breathe. Brad talked about putting, biologicals in, biostimulants, stuff like that. I'm glad to hear him answer the way that he did. I'm a huge fan of Whole Shot. Whole Shot is an amazing product that we've seen some really cool things with, but can it work on soil that can't breathe? No. And guess what? Nothing else is either. Nothing else is either. So one of the things that I really want to help and kind of land our ship today, the last part of this workshop, is to really talk about the water element. There's an element here that we have experienced in Nebraska that I'll guarantee you Brad doesn't get to experience in Illinois, and that's called irrigation. You know, they spend 6 weeks planting, 6 weeks harvesting. I have no idea what they do the rest of the year. Right? No cattle, no irrigation. I'm like, what do you guys do? I don't know. But the thing that I have learned in all the years that I've been working under irrigation is water is one of the biggest determinants to profitability of anything else that we can do. Why? Because water, you're either going to use your water in such a way that it will make you money or it will cost you money. When you go and push start on the center pivot is one of the biggest struggles that we have in this country because it's so simple. You push start. If you're blessed to have electric wells and you push start, it goes. And believe me when I say that water is emotional. We get emotional with water. You know how Glen was talking about earlier when he said, remove the water out of the plant? How much of that plant is water? About 80%. How much of you is water? Huh? You feel it. Have you ever felt thirsty? We know what it's like to feel dry, to feel thirsty. That's why we're emotionally connected every time that we push that start button and the water comes on, things happen. So that's why I want to talk about wealthy soil. This has been a big part of what we focus on is the wealthy soil. I read this quote several years ago. Each soil has had its own history, like a river, a mountain, a forest, or any natural thing. Its present condition is due to the influences of many things and events of the past. That's a powerful statement because here's the truth. Right now, at this very moment, that includes me, Glen, all the other consultants, the retailers you work with, the seed guys you work with, the product, the equipment guys you work with, every single decision you make as it applies to that field is creating the history for that soil. Think about that for a moment. And I'm part of that with you. When I think back to a lot of the things that I've done in the past, I was a mass murderer of soil biology. It's really what I was. And I did a lot of mass murdering out there. At Avant, one of our biggest things that we want to be able to accomplish is to be able to move forward with abundant life. We want to grow abundant life in our soil. And as any other life on earth, you have to be able to breathe to be able to do that. And I'm going to walk through this water thing because as soon as we apply water, that pie chart that Glen was talking about on here, you've got your organic matter and you've got your minerals and you got your 25% air and 25% water. You know how many fields out here are not 25% air? Because most of it is all water, maybe 10% air. And I've been in a lot of those fields, and that's a massive problem. Guess what? That's creating a history. It's creating a history in that soil, and I've been part of that. So what I'm working with on today at Avant is to get that fixed, reverse a lot of the things that I've done. Now, Glen loves this. I've been talking about this for a long time. He verified it for me that it was true. Thank you. When we think about a healthy plant, when we remove the water, 47% carbon, 43% oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, right? 97% of that plant right there. But here's the problem. You can't buy carbon from your local ag retailer. I guess you can in different forms, if say you can. But you can build carbon, but you have to do things right. Okay? Oxygen. I will preach about oxygen. Tell me a nutrient that can get into the plant without some level of oxygen. Can you think of one? Oxygen's just a little bit important in the soil, okay? But here's the cool thing, as Glen mentioned before, so I'm not going to hang on this. If 94%, even if we get all that right, everything else is going to be a fight. Think about it. If that 94% is not right, everything else is going to be a fight. Think about what you guys are fighting out there. Think about what you're fighting up against right now, and think about the impact of water to address it. If the 94% is perfect, but we mismanage water, what happens to 100% of it? Think about that. That's a power play. You ever seen anything like that out in your part of the world? How many of you guys saw pictures like that driving here today? Yeah. This is not fun, but this is stuff that we see all the time. So when we start thinking about water, I'm going to challenge us to do something as farmers, as consultants. If we're going to be working with farmers in Nebraska, I want you to learn to listen. Learn to listen to the plants talk with water. I have learned so much in the last 20 years. I've had the sheer blessing of being in 46 of the 48 states and Brazil managing water. And no matter where I go, doesn't matter where I'm at, I could be in Washington, I could be in the Carolinas, and guess what? Water still moves the same. Still moves the same. And it's still the hardest nutrient to manage. It really is. Think about it. We're going to go through some of the numbers. We're going to find out why it's so stupidly hard to manage. So we have to learn to listen using the water. We're going to talk about that a little bit. How many gallons is in 1 acre inch of water?
27,154.
Man, if I had money in my pocket, you'd get some. 27,154. How many gallons of water on 130 acres? 1 inch of water on 130 acres? It's just a math equation. I'll make it easy for you. 3,530,000 gallons of water. You ever really thought about that? How many pounds of water on 130 acres? 29,440,000. You ever think about what it weighs? How many pounds of water, a nutrient you're putting out into your soil? You ever heard about compaction? Do you know there's a thing out here called water-induced compaction? There's water-induced compaction in a lot of our fields. There's a lot of them in Nebraska that I deal with every year. Water-induced compaction. That little tool right there will show you instantly where it's at. It doesn't have to be in a wheel track. I've seen guys who do controlled traffic all the time, and I step out of controlled traffic, go 14 inches deep, and I'm compacted. Where'd that come from? A lot of it is water-induced compaction. Now, I'm going to talk today about how to get rid of that. We're going to talk today about how to fix that, how to get a deep, deep root system that's full of air. Get that deep root system full of air, we can start capturing oxygen, we can start using things the right way. So that's what we're going to really dive into today. Now, before we do that, though, I want to talk about some of the basics. I always have mixed mixed feedback with this little experiment. I wish I would have the little cups in front of you. Some of the workshops that we do, I'm going to put little cups in front of you so you can really see how water moves through soil, okay? But if I have a pot, let's say I have a pot that's just your regular garden pot, and I fill it with dry soil, and then I put into that dry soil red water, okay? If that soil is completely dry and I put red water in it to fill it half full, is that water going to move? Is it going to continue to move? Is it going to stay there? What happens to the water? If I fill it half full, just let it sit there, the soil's dry, I fill it that full, will that water stay there? Mm-hmm. But if I only put that much water and then I put no more in, it's gonna stay there. I can put that in there, hold it for 12 hours. That red water is gonna stay right there. Okay? Now, I want to do something a little bit more. Let's say I put yellow water. That sits for 12 hours. Water hasn't moved. My red water is still there. Now I take yellow water and I put yellow water on top of the red water and I finish filling the pot. Here's a question. After the yellow water is applied, something will happen in the pot. Which one is right? Who wants to take a guess at it? Which one is right? Jeremy already knows you don't count. You're wearing an Avant hat, you don't count. Who wants to take a stab at this? I put yellow water on top of the red water.
2.
Number 2? Okay. Why number 2?
I remember Faulkner telling me about this. I don't remember.
Okay. So you know the answer. You're not sure why. Okay. Anybody else have a different opinion? Guys, this is extremely critical because we make so many mistakes here. I did for years. You're right. Number 2 is correct. Now, why is number 2 correct? If I put yellow water on top of my red water, what makes number 2 correct?
The red water already filled up pore spaces.
That's right. Any of the airspace that we already had in there, the soil particles, my water attached to that soil particle, it's not draining anymore. It's at capacity. I put yellow water on top of the red water that's already attached to the soil. There's nothing for the yellow water to attach to. So the yellow water has to go through the red water. It's already attached. It's bonded up, right? My yellow water goes through the red water and will come out the bottom. Comes out the bottom of my pot. Now, what I want you to take away from that, you guys that irrigate, the last water on is the first water out. If your soils have water in it that is already attached to the soil particle and you put more water on, that water goes through until it finds something dry or it keeps going back to the groundwater. It has no choice. Water will only move to an area of drier soil. It will only find the dry soil to attach to. If it's wet, it will move through it. Think about that. Think about that. That's extremely, extremely important when you're managing water. When you're managing air in your root zone, understanding this is critical. Taking advantage of rainfall, understanding this is critical. And we went through those numbers. You think about putting on 1 inch of water on 130 acres. You put 3 million gallons out there. How many nutrients are coming out of the ground with that water? Some positive, some negative. How many of you are testing your water quality? Anybody running water tests in here? You do some, are you testing all of them? Pretty much.
Did this year, tested everything.
Okay, perfect. What'd you learn in that?
A lot of bicarbonates and 7.6 to 8.6 pH.
Yep. So now you look at that 8.6, all those bicarbonates, and you're doing that across 130 acres, how long does it start to add up in negative tonnage on some of that?
We're seeing it.
Yeah, you're seeing it. Guys, these are critical components to water management. So we go and get Glen stuff right. We get the soil to breathe. We do what we have to do. And then we go and put that water back in there. What are we doing? We're causing us another cycle again, right? That's why getting these things right, getting the right components in there to build carbon fast. Now, this is why I will recommend that we use the least amount of groundwater as possible to grow our crop. You want to use the least amount. You want to leverage every rainfall you get because your groundwater is bringing up elements in it that are not good. How many of you live around Hastings area? Anybody? Yeah? So what are you seeing?
You got nitrates that are rising, they're finding uranium rising,
Yep.
selenium, chromium, all the good stuff.
All the good stuff coming right out of that groundwater. Those guys are seeing it before a lot of other places in Nebraska are. But when you're bringing uranium up with your groundwater, is that a positive in any way, shape, or form to your soil?
Your corn might glow someday.
Guys, this is happening everywhere. Realize we've only been irrigating like this for 80 years, and we're having these kind of issues. We have to get serious about this. We have to. Because as we just keep treating water like it's an endless resource and we can do whatever we want to with it, we're going to start seeing more and more and more and more of these problems. And it is costing us a substantial amount of money. So let's talk about how do we start addressing it. This is just your typical water use curve that you'll find on really any, Google it. Everybody has about the same water use curve for corn, okay? But what I want to walk through with you is where that water's at, where we need that water at, and what we need to do to correctly manage that water through the growing season. Now, you're going to hear me talk a lot about air. You're going to hear me talk a lot about infiltration depth. And this is the starting point. When you put that seed in the ground the very first time, and that seed opens up and begins to produce a root, and it just starts to come up out of the ground, how much water does it need? Not very much. It needs air. It needs access to nutrition right there. That's what it needs. It needs access to the right things to get it to root and grow. We have to be very careful at this stage how we manage the water. The one thing that I will talk about, I hear this all the time. We plant it and then we water it to get it to emerge. Is that the best way to do it? Is that the best way to manage it? What do you think? Just think into some of the things you've heard today. Is planting it dry and wetting it down the best option for emergence, best emergence? Vance, you're saying no. Why is that?
It'll cause a crust.
Cause a crust? Anything else? Jordan? No thoughts? Here's the thing. One thing I learned about managing water in Texas, when it's really dry, you want to wet the soil and get the soil back to a natural environment. Let it wet, let it soak through, let it be as close to nature as possible when you plant the seed in it, and leave it alone. Get moisture in the profile, plant the seed, and leave it alone. As soon as you irrigate over the top of your seed that's already planted, are you going to get consistency out there? Probably not, especially if you're just putting on enough to get emergence up. We're not going to be as consistent as we need to be. Get your soil wet first, let it dry, then plant. Even if it takes you an extra 5 days to do that and do it right, it's money well spent. Your emergence will be better. I can promise you that. But that's a different way of thinking. And I learned that from a Texas farmer who grows 3 crops on actually 2 wells. He's got 2 wells that produce a whopping 350 gallons per minute. He's got 3/4 of ground on 350 gallon a minute. He knows how to leverage water like nobody I've ever seen. He grows cotton, sorghum, and 240 bushel corn on 350 gallon a minute on 3/4. Does he know how to leverage water? Big time. He knows how to use it because he doesn't have it. So he taught me, he said, Kylen, never plant your seed in dry soil and then try to water it up. Get your soil back to nature's way of doing it. Get it wet, get it soaked down, get it moist, plant the seed in it, leave it alone, get it out of the ground, and then learn to manage it. That's what you want to do. Okay? So at this stage, we need moisture in that first foot. We're looking at 1 to 12 inches. We want moisture in there. Now, as that plant grows, we get up into that V8, V9, V12 stage. Guess what? Now we have water that needs to come out of the 24-inch root zone, 12 to 24 inches. We got to start thinking about getting those roots to go deep. Okay? We got to think about where that root system is. I see people on social media all the time. They pull up these plants. And they pull up these plants and they lay them on the tailgate of their pickup because they're trying to compare one product to another. And they're looking at these root systems on the tailgate of their pickup. Do you know what? The only thing I can guarantee about those 2 plants laying on the tailgate? They will now no longer produce a crop. That is a guarantee. Those 2 plants laying on the tailgate will not help me produce a crop because now they are dead. Now, is it? When I see that root system, have you ever seen on a corn plant that, this root system is like 3 foot long? Not very often. Not very often. We see these little bitty root systems and we see things that should be a lot bigger, right? And I look at those and I'm like, wow, that's a little bit more root, but is it really what it should be? Is it? So I'm asking all these questions, and there's a lot of reasons why it's not. Glen talked about a bunch of them. We don't have the airspace. We don't have the room for it. At this stage, that root growth going deep is extremely, extremely important. This stage right here, critical. Why is this such a critical stage? It's why we planted the seed in the first place. This stage right here, that stage right there, right up to that VT. Think about your kids. When you plant a seed, and your wife you find out your wife is going to have a little baby, guess what? There's not a thing you can do. You just hope and pray that baby's healthy and it's good when it comes into the world. The same is true with that little seed. You plant it, you hope it's good when it comes into the world. Guess what? When it comes into the world, now you got responsibility. You got to take care of it. You got to nurture it. So guess what? You want your kids well grounded? You want your kids well rooted, or you want shallow rooted kids? You want well deep rooted corn plants. You got to manage them well. So that early stage, that's what we call prepping to pollinate. When we manage water, we are prepping our plants to pollinate. It's the only reason we planted the seed is to reproduce. We prep the plant to pollinate, and then we go into reproductive stage. We need roots at 24 to 36 inches if we're going to really make money. That right there, that 20% will put you above the average on profits. I can promise you. I have seen it over and over and over again. Okay? However, in Nebraska, we have a problem. That red line right there is what the average center pivot can apply on any one given day. Somewhere in that 26 hundredths of an inch per day is what you can apply and infiltrate. All right? How many of you have ever had to deal with runoff? Yep. You know, there's a lot of solutions for runoff. If you deal with runoff issues, we need to talk because I can help you with that a lot. But runoff is something that is absolutely critical. But right there, that stage where that big curve goes up there, when you're in reproductive stage in a year that's not 2025, when it rained every week, in a lot of years, you're needing to irrigate. But how do we irrigate? What's most important? Is it rate or timing? What's most important when we push the start button? The timing or the rate? Isn't that an interesting question? I asked my grandfather years ago, why do we put on 70 hundredths of an inch of water? And my grandpa looked at me and said, because that's what they told us to do. I said, who's they? Well, it was our pivot dealer. And I'm sitting I'm not the brightest apple on the tree, but I'm sitting there and thinking, our pivot dealer doesn't even grow any crops. Why is the pivot dealer telling me how much water I should put on? So I kept asking my grandpa, why do we put on 70 hundredths of an inch? And he said, well, I don't know what else to do. And that's what we did, right? So I started asking a lot of questions years ago. Says, well, how much is the right rate? What's the right time? Well, let me throw one more caveat at you, because you've got all this. I'm looking at this growing root system like it actually works that way. What if there isn't? What if you only end up with a 12 or 14 inch root system, and that's what you get to work with all the way through that big water use curve? You think your timing's going to be different? You think your rate's going to be different? If you have this during that tough time versus 12 inches, you're going to manage substantially different. So you need to know exactly where your water's being drawn in to that plant. And if you don't know, then you will guess. So, precision irrigation. I hear people talk about precision irrigation all the time. I did it for years. And the more I did precision irrigation, the more I realized just how foolish it really is. And I see people, I've seen center pivots run out here. In fact, some of you might have some of these. I see center pivots run out here with regulator packs and nozzle packages on them. They're doing variable rate irrigation unintentionally. Every time they turn the pivot on, the pivot goes around and it's applying different rates of water all the time. You look at yield maps on fields with hills. This guy had a little epiphany when he comes driving out here from Illinois. It's like, Nebraska's not flat. No, we're not flat, are we? You see any pivots on the hills? Or do you wonder how in the heck did that thing get up there? How did it get up there and not break? I had a pivot out in Wallace, a 26 tower machine. This is before we were smart enough to know that's not a good idea. 26 tower machine. The base of it is 12 foot deep to try and hold that center point in place. It's got one hill out there, and this was back in the early 90s. I was helping my uncle build this thing. We got one hill out there, and the pivot gets stuck at the top of the hill. We're like, how does a pivot get stuck at the top of the hill? So we went out there and we're watching the pivot come around. The pivot gets up to the top and the front wheel's just coming off the ground. Just sitting there teetering. The back one spins out and gets stuck at the top of the hill. So we put a 30-gallon drum on the front of it and we put a float in there. And as the pivot goes up the hill, it fills the drum with water. And then when it comes over the edge, the float flips the shutoff on and we drain the water out. So we deal with hills, but we get the water up there, get it back down. So those root systems in there, critical. Get the timing right. That was really a rabbit trail, wasn't it? Okay. You want to look inside of the root zone. Avant Agricultural Technologies, that's the name of the company. Here's a couple of different things that we look at. You want to know the technologies that we're going to use? Here's one of them. This is one. This is actually the starting point. We got to know, can your soil breathe? This is going to be our starting point. Our second point, refractometers, EC sensors. This is a technology that we're going to start with, that we're going to use. We're not going to get into variable rate, all that other stuff yet. You'll get into that someday in the future as you get all the other pieces fixed. But we'll start with the fundamentals, get everything working right. And then to do that, I'm going to recommend we look inside and listen to the root zone. The plants will talk to us. How many of you in here use soil moisture probes? Okay. Soil moisture probes in many, many cases have been used extremely incorrectly. My English in Nebraska is amazing, extremely incorrectly. They have not been used right. Because a soil moisture probe used correctly is all about the plant. It's all about the plant, not the moisture. You should not be using a soil moisture probe to manage water. You should be using a soil moisture probe to manage plants and manage how your plants are responding in the soil conditions in which they live. When you are manage your plants, you will make totally different decisions based on what that probe tells you. Okay? So a probe, back up here a little bit, when a probe pulls a reading, this thing buried in the ground, this one has 9 sensors. The one I'm recommending today has 6. In fact, I've got one here. This is our soil sensor. Those of you who have used probes, what's unique about this one? There's no cables, no wires. We hate wires, so we stay away from cables. There's 6 sensors on that thing. But when a sensor goes off, every 30 minutes, that thing buried in the ground, every 30 minutes, it pulls a reading. It pulls a reading down to 44 inches. Ask your agronomist what they're going to charge you to go to your field and pull data every 30 minutes down to 44 inches throughout the cropping season. Oh, actually, this one's buried permanently, so 365 days, what are they going to charge you for that? Right? So we're pulling data. What it does, every 30 minutes, it pulls a frequency. So it sends a signal out into that soil, vibrates, basically just vibrates 100% of the water molecules in that soil. That's all it does. And every sensor does it, and it turns out telling us a root zone story. That's all it does. Every 30 minutes, it's writing a book. It's writing a story. What's happening inside of that root zone? We're not going to go into a lot of data on this because I'm going to get into some of the specifics on it. But that right there is a storybook. It will tell you how healthy your soil is. It's going to tell you how good your carbon is, how well your roots are developing. It tells you a tremendous, tremendous story. And no, it's not a carbon sensor. It's not an oxygen sensor. But the plants will tell you if they can breathe. Your plants will tell you. Now, a soil moisture sensor, what's one of the most basic? It's stair steps. There's data signatures in there. At night, we want that plant to shut down, don't we? Want that plant to shut down and sleep. Much like I should have when I was a teenager. I should have shut down and sleep. You have to shut down and sleep once in a while, don't you? When you shut down and sleep, the sun comes up the next day and photosynthesis starts to happen. That's a plant response, guys. That's not about the water. We may be measuring water, but that's a plant system. The plant is drawing water out of that soil, okay? And we do that continuously. Day, night, day, night, day, night. And I can watch my plant draw water out of the root zone. Does it matter how many days I can draw water? Absolutely it does. Because I got to get the timing right. Moisture recharge, rain, irrigation, doesn't matter. But I will tell you this, when you do a moisture recharge with rainfall, it's different than irrigation. Big time. Your plants will use it differently. Big time. The concentration of rainwater in soil that's mixed up with other water, your groundwater, it's different. You got to learn to manage that. So we look at drainage indicators, but here's some of the things that you can really do with the soil moisture probe that's used properly. Plant root growth indication, daily transpiration, plant stress prediction. You know, I see a lot of guys that put sensors out on their plants, and they want to look at satellite imagery and this and that and the other to manage stress. If you're looking at satellite imagery to manage stress, the stress has already happened if you're seeing it on the picture. If you're putting a plant sensor on to measure plant stress, you're already stressed if the sensor's picking it up. I want to predict stress, okay? I want plant stress prediction. I want to predict when I'm going to have stress. Those are things that we have to learn, okay? Soil health quality, soil structure problems, groundwater issue, plant soil response to rain versus irrigation, leaching and potential nitrogen loss. That's all stuff that I want to see with a probe, okay? So what are some of the signatures that we talk about? I show this to a lot of people, especially those that use probes. This is mind-blowing to most people, okay? This is something we learned, if you could see the dates on the bottom. This was first learned in 2004. Now, why we don't know this information today is beyond me. But this was data from 2004. We see those little stair steps up there. Don't those look good? Those of you that use probes. Nice little stair steps. Here's the problem. That right there is waterlogged. That soil is waterlogged. It looks good, but it is waterlogged. And it was waterlogged for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, 6 days. How many of you would have a rain event happen and you would irrigate within 6 days? We did. Very often we would irrigate within 6 days. That's a week. For crying out loud, it rained on Monday, it's Sunday. We're going to irrigate. But look at this. At the end of that 6 days, we hit peak water use right there. As soon as the soil got enough air back into it, as soon as the air ratio was high enough, look how big the stair steps got. If your plants do not have the ability to get massive transpiration is what you're looking for. Big transpiration. That's where your yield comes from. You want massive stair steps. And a lot of guys won't see that because we irrigate too much too soon. We think it's been 6 days. My stair steps are down. Oh, I can hold the water. Yes, you can hold the water, but at what cost? Is it the right time to do it? Timing is everything. So you're going to stress either on the high end or on the low end of your water in the profile. See, you can stress with too much and not enough water. We were talking about GMO crops. These new hybrids, a lot of the new hybrids, what's one trait that's built into every single one of them? Drought, what? Tolerance. We've genetically changed our plants, and then we think we can irrigate them exactly the same way. Those plants require more oxygen. They require more air. They're created differently. And yet we treat them the same and think that we're about putting moisture into the ground and just keeping the ground wet. That's not the case, guys. That's a huge problem. So
you don't see major stair steps basically on your probes. You're saying it's waterlogged.
You very often. Yep. Now, that's very healthy soil. Okay. When you're looking at a really healthy soil, you'll see that. Okay. If you're dealing with soil structures that are tight, it'll just stay the same until it starts to dry out. So that's something you got to look for, and that's part of the soil health evaluation that we'll see. We're also looking at it on an individual sensor basis. So our top sensor, our second sensor, our third one, it'll respond at different ways, which is actually what we're looking at here. So as we look at the individual sensors and we start to see where our roots are developing at different stages, at different times, we can start to see those different lengths of stair steps. I didn't really zoom into it, but if you look at the red one, you'll see right in the middle of that, there's a little bit bigger, longer stair steps, right? Look at the blue one up at the top, a little bit longer stair steps right in the middle, right? You want to look for those. You want to identify those because those are indicators of where you want to be and what you need to target. So as your soil health keeps getting better and better and better, you'll start to see those stair steps look different. Yeah.
Define waterlogged as a depth.
As a depth?
Depth of profile.
Okay. So
So like, can you be waterlogged in the top foot, and you tell me not to irrigate, or can I put on the water and let it force it like the pot of yellow and red water?
Yeah.
I just go ahead and irrigate to fill up the profile.
Yep.
Or are you talking waterlogged like from top to bottom?
Mm-hmm. It could be either or, honestly. Okay. Where do you have a hard pan? Or do you? If you don't have a hard pan, but you've got a good root system that's really deep and it's drawing water out consistently, like several of these graphs are, you'll notice as we go on through the season here, as we develop a root system at each level, our recharge, in fact, I'll just slip ahead to that. You'll notice these recharges. We're not waterlogging because when we irrigate, we're driving water through the root zone all the way down there, okay? But if we had let's say a water-induced hard pan, see, here's the problem with water-induced hard pans and salt-based inputs. What's it starting to build up where we have no root system and we have no airspace? What starts to build up on that hard pan? Salts. So when I think about water logging, a lot of times in Nebraska, what we'll see is we'll see waterlogged in that 14 inches, okay? Because that's the size of our pot. It's not very often that you'll see it just at your top layer, because typically it'll move down to whatever layer it is that's going to hold that water. And you can always tell with a sensor when you have a waterlogging event and you have a stratification layer or something that's holding that water, because it'll come down, it'll build up moisture, and it'll break off. You'll watch your probe, and you're watching this, and the moisture's just staying there, and then pretty soon one day it just, boom, it falls off. You get a big wetting event, for example, a big rain event, and you'll see your probe drop. Now, why did I get rain, more water, and my probe graph dropped? Because you broke through a hard pan, and where that water was stalled, it fell through, which is a good thing. You had waterlogging, but you probably didn't know it. And those are the things that we're looking for. So in these data signatures, watching the probes, I'm looking at how fast can I penetrate water through the root zone? How deep does that irrigation event go? I want my soil moisture, my soil porosity. I want my soil to be in such a case that I can infiltrate 6-8 inches of water an hour. That's what I want. I want to get to the point where I can put 6 or 8 inches of water an hour through the soil. Have you ever seen people do that? Anybody in here seen 6 or 8 inches of water penetrating the soil? Yeah? What kind of conditions are those?
Former alfalfa ground.
Yeah.
With followed by like a heavy wheat stubble, and planted to milo after that, and it just so
good consistent root.
So it started off very dry.
Yep.
Facts.
Yep.
And then you have all these holes in the ground. You know, you talked about the hard ground of the potentiometer, but I mean, this is hard ground, but it has, holes every.
Yep. That's one way you can do it. Vance, what's another way that I can get a lot of water in the ground in a short amount of time? Earthworm channels, cover crops. Any of you guys in here know Dean Kroll? Okay. Dean has some cover crops on some of his slopes, and he's verified 6 to 8 inches of water in some of his cover crops after 8 years of cover cropping. Now, I'm not saying that you have to cover crop. There's other ways you can do things, but you have to get that soil condition to where it can infiltrate a lot. in a short amount of time. You're pumping 800 gallon a minute out of your pivot. Where's 50% of your water going out? The outside 3 towers. That's 50% of your water out there. If that thing's going up and down a hill, that's 400 gallon a minute coming out of those N3 towers. You need 400 gallon a minute going into that soil in a fast manner. Okay, you got to get that water into the soil quickly. And that's what I'm talking about here. These are actually irrigation events that are going down as far as 32 inches of penetration with one irrigation pass. That's awesome. That's what you want to try and get to. You won't have water logging if you can get water to go down through there. So when I think about water logging, it's anywhere. This is not waterlogged. This is taking water all the way down. It recharges. You can see with every color, it goes up and it holds the water.
But saturate that whole way, so it's different from waterlogging.
This is different than waterlogging. This actually didn't saturate in any of the situations. Let me give you an example. If you look back here at our red line at that beginning, that 24-inch sensor, okay? We come over to where our roots started to draw down. Every irrigation event that we did, we never went back to the full point. We never went back to this level here. So we increased in moisture, we held all that moisture, but we never went back to the absolute full point. There was no water logging anywhere here. So the moisture would go up and it would hold it and go right back to work. So at this level, we're still under our full point for that red sensor. Does that make sense? Yeah. Takes a little bit to learn all that, but there's nothing here that actually waterlogged because it went down, stepped up, went right back to work.
Are those sensors a percentage of saturation, or what's it log?
So this is another really great question, because this is where oftentimes your universities will try to make sense out of numbers. Don't make sense out of numbers, especially with soil moisture probes. Here's the reason why. If you're a probe manufacturer, let's say, BJ, you're developing probes, and you're going to work with soil sensors that go everywhere in the world, okay? What calibration number are you going to put in for a soil type? Which soil type do you choose? This is why you can't use numbers. You use signatures, data signatures, which are the graphs. How do the graphs work? How do the graphs respond? Because if you try to use a percentage or an actual number, and you're building a soil moisture probe that's made in a manufacturing facility and it's a constant, which calibration is right for your soil? You really don't know.
So the thermometer without numbers on.
Thermometer, yeah. So you're looking at the trends, looking at the signatures, how the graphs move. That's really what you want to know, okay? If you learn how the graphs are reading and the trend of them, then you can start to learn the numbers. Now, the permanent probes, after the first year, because we don't remove the probe. Brian's got these probes too, by the way. Brian's able to get you guys set up with these. That permanent sensor stays constant. And because we never pull it out, the software will self-create a standard with the calibration. Okay? The permanent sensor is a game changer. If you ever want to be able to variable rate irrigate, or you want to be able to automate your irrigation and deal with some of the labor challenges you have, put permanent sensors in, because then your numbers become valuable. But every time you pull a probe out and you put it back in, I promise you could pull a probe out of that hole right there, put it right back in the same hole, and your calibration's different. That's a problem. So that's why you never really want to follow the numbers until you've had a probe in long enough that you can trust the numbers. But a probe is like a light bulb. It comes out with a constant calibration. It turns on, it shuts off, it pulls a reading, it tells a story. There's a story that it's telling, but it's not a data set that can be trusted. That's the struggle. The numbers cannot be trusted until it's been in long enough to trust it. This is an example of a really bad soil that cannot breathe. You see these graphs? I don't know what the numbers are, don't need to. This right here, 7 inches of water on this field. 7 inches of water. The moisture goes up. Right here, look at this pink line. Goes up, saturated for about 3 days, drops down this level and this level exactly the same. It didn't have any airspace in any one of those soil profile levels. The top sensor, the black line at the top, is 2. This one down here is 36. This soil is so tight that 7 inches of moisture did nothing for it. All of that water run off the field. All of it. And this field, by the way, has massive washouts in it now after 7 inches. So he's looking forward to harvest. But this is a field that we're actually, that thing went out there and we're down about that far and we hit 200 pounds of pressure. Guess what we're doing, Glenn? That's our first fix on that field. My first year working with him, we look at the probe to know what to do next. The probe will tell us if the soil needs fixing. So, our permanent sensors, guys, this is a quick little update there. I'm going to get wrapped up. Our longest probes now, we're going into like 2,500, 2,600 days of nonstop continuous data where we're pulling sensor data out every 30 minutes. And right now, we've got probes in the field going into year 6 or 7. I don't remember whichever one it was. And nonstop data. But what's really cool is you look at the bottom of the graph. Corn, soybeans, corn, soybeans, corn, soybeans. They do not respond the same. Not even a little bit. They don't leave your soil profile at the end of the year in the same condition. Your soybean fields and corn fields at the end of the year will look differently inside the root zone. So you want to think about that. Here's another soil health thing. I'm gonna start to land it here. This was actually a dryland field. With permanent sensors, we're putting a lot of sensors in dryland with just rain-fed environments. So because we do not remove the probes, they're staying in. The rain-fed farmers are using them to make planting decisions, input decisions. So this is an example of a field that needs some work. It needs some breathing room again. So it rained February. You can see the timeline at the bottom. The first wetting event, so it wetted down to about 20 inches. But you see that pink line, how it has a slow increase for about 5 days, right in that ballpark, if you can see that. And then the next wetting event, towards the end of February, we wet down all the way to 28 inches. Well, look how many days it wetted down. It just slowly drained water into that 28-inch root zone. Guys, that shouldn't be working that way. We should be able to get that water down there quicker, hold it, store it, increase, hold the water. Not what we want it to do. But this took 12 days and it slowly increased over 12 days. What do you think is going on in that root zone? It takes water 12 days to get down. What's happening? Any guesses? Would you say it might be a little tight?
A lot of energy being put into roots to try and push them down that far.
Oh, you couldn't get roots down to 28 inches on this field. Not a chance. We went out there with just a hand probe. You had to drive the hand probe in with the hammer to get dirt out of it. This is such tight soil. So guess what? By the way, this guy actually is going to be working with Glen stuff this fall. He's the guy that I was talking about. He has the liquid application with his drill. So we're putting weed out this fall. Guess what? We're starting an Avant Advantage program with him. Start having the first conversation tomorrow. about how to address these issues in his fields. We're focused on getting rid of weed pressure, improving soil porosity. We're looking at just getting that soil to breathe again. And we have some very, very specific goals, step by step by step. We're starting the right way. So we'll end with this. I won't go through all that. It's getting late. So guys, as we think about the everything that we went through and learned today, I need to update that email address is not right anymore. We need to go through and think about this day. We started with Glen talking about how do we get the soil to open up and breathe. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. We went and talked about, Brad shared a few of his ideas, building the right products, doing some of the right things to get the right products out there once your soil can breathe. Okay? We've got to get the system working together. And then I come along and we start looking at how many nutrients, what do we have to do with our water to make sure we maintain what we're doing with carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. We don't screw it up with water. We make it better with water. We get the timing right. We learn how to infiltrate deep. We get roots deep. We get water deep. You'd realize when you take 1.5 inches of water and you drive it deep, what does it draw in with it? Air. It brings air through that root zone. You want to bring air in when you irrigate. If you irrigate and your fields are muddy, sloppy, wet, muddy, we got a problem. We need to change that. You should be able to irrigate, get that water to go through very quickly, get your top dry again. You want air in there. Okay? So those are some of the things we want to think about. So any thoughts, comments, questions?
I know we should be using probes and stuff. We farm river bottom, ground.
Yep.
Same pass. It could be, gumbo, mud to sand. So we always wondered, where do you put the probe?
Yep. Well, what's a couple of different things. Number one, what's a majority?
Man, I don't know. There's like a transition from a slow transition from the gumbo to like the beach sand and the.
What's your best producing? Year in, year out.
Well, the gumbo when it's drained. I mean.
Gumbo when it's drained, probably the sand when it's wet.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why, look at a yield map, make a decision, and pull a trigger. The question I would have bigger than that is, what do you do with your irrigation already? Do you just put on one application rate?
Well, and then we'll go back on the sand more. We can adjust it from the center point.
Okay.
Okay.
Then in that situation, I'd probably go back into the sandier soils and put your first probe in. This is another thing, guys. If you buy a probe, know your why before you buy. Know your why before you buy. Don't come to me and buy a probe without knowing exactly why you want it. You want this probe to make you money. So put it out there on where you can make the biggest impact with your management practice. And then from there, we fix that, we address that. Then we can go on to maybe put a second probe in. Maybe eventually year 2 or 3, you can put a probe in the other part of the field because you're learning how to make money with it, right? When you learn how to make money with a probe, then you can turn around and put the right numbers in the right places to get the right outcomes. But to be real honest, start with what you can manage first. It sounds like you're managing the sandier soils more than you do the others. So that's probably what I would do. That makes sense?
Yep.
Especially if it's a permanent one. You leave it in there and learn from it. Yep. Good questions. Any other thoughts, comments? Here's one thing that I will also attest. Vance can attest to this. So Vance put a probe in at his place. What did we do wrong on Vance's probe? Installation. Your probe is only as good as it is installed correctly. And when you've got a seasonal probe that goes in and then comes out, you put it in June, the end of May, and you pull it out in August. If that install isn't right, that entire season is lost. And we've got a new style of probe. This probe just came out in the last, few months. And we put one of these in on Vance's. We misinstalled it. Not Vance's fault, our fault. But these things have to go in right. They have to be installed right. Make sure you get a good installer when you buy a sensor. In fact, one of the guys said it this way. If he said, if you think using a professional is expensive, try using an amateur installer.
I was gonna say, do you know any professional installers?
I do, and I am not one of them. So.
The 3X managed on the second row.
Yeah. I watched them do it the second time. So, all right. Any other thoughts, guys? Any questions for these other guys? All right. Well, number one, thank you so much for being here. Make sure you get everybody's contact information. Get Brian's contact information. We're all here to help you guys grow. We want to be a part of your success as we move forward. I can tell you one thing for sure. I'm able to help you be successful because I have had a lot of failures. I can promise you that. I can write a book on what not to do. On these sensors, I've got one of the very first farmers I worked with sensors. I screwed up on his field so bad. That was 18, 20 years ago. And even yet today, he still won't talk to me. Because my recommendations were absolutely not right. And I spent all winter long trying to figure out what the heck did I do wrong. And you know what the problem was? I looked only at the soil and the soil moisture. I didn't think about air, didn't think about infiltration depth and rates and everything else. I had to learn what I taught you guys today because the numbers, I was following the numbers, and it literally destroyed that field. And I learned that I had to fix so many other situations before I could correctly manage the water. So guys, it's taken me a long time and I've had a lot of mistakes over the years, so I can help you be successful. So get a hold of myself, get a hold of Brian, and we're here to help you guys grow. So thanks a lot for being here today, guys.